Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Paterson, and today I'm going to be showing you and telling you the 5 graphic design mistakes you should avoid. If you're a creative professional, a graphic designer, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, you make mistakes. It's part of the process. In fact, a lot of the mistakes that we make actually help our process out. However, there are so many mistakes that I've seen over on our subreddit, and it's mistakes that I'm always constantly pointing out. So I thought I'd make a video and put an end to these mistakes, these fundamental mistakes today. Mistake number 1 is too many fonts. We've all been there. We've been new designers and we love fonts. We maybe find a website called defont.com, or maybe you recently got a subscription to Envato Elements, link below, and you just need to use all these fonts that you have found. Well, the problem is when you use too many fonts, it can clutter up the workspace. As a brand identity designer, we select a certain typeface, which is a collection of fonts, if you didn't know. A typeface has many fonts, and a font is part of normally a typeface. We select a typeface because it looks similar all the way through. It may have different weights, it may be wider, it may be more condensed, it might be italic. Using a maximum of 3 fonts will ensure you to create a nice consistent flow within all your work. For example, I do Instagram carousels. If you don't know, go follow me down below. I teach all about graphic design and sort of the behind the scenes, the BTS of what it means to be a successful designer. And in those carousels, I use my brand typeface. That's Montserrat for the most part because it's so legible at small scales. Generally, I use Montserrat as my headline. It's bold, it's nice, it fits carousels perfectly, and it's very geometric. But I also have a couple of other typefaces. I also use Frisbee, CF, and Jasmine or Yasmin. These are more of my display types. Now, the trick that I have is I don't ever venture out of these typefaces unless it's for illustrative purposes. Now, for instance, you've got a poster design, there's lots of information, and you think you need to use more typefaces. Well, let me tell you what, you're wrong. In fact, instead of using multiple typefaces, you could lay out the poster or the cover or anything, the Instagram carousel, better to more involve the typeface. So that's tip number 1. Stop using too many typefaces and use only 3. Not in every project, but in that one project. Tip number 2 is not enough white space. Now, white space is different from negative space, as negative space is the space within an object, but the white space is the space outside of it, so the framing. What a lot of amateur designers do is create work with not enough white space. There's not enough border around it. What this does is it sort of fills the page and it doesn't train the eye to what really matters. Now, a great way to combat this, first of all, is to have guides. These guides could be put as a border. Essentially, you don't put any work outside of there. The second way to learn this is by learning layout and composition. A good layout in graphic design is a way to allow people to read easily without fatiguing the eye or confusing the viewer. It should be natural from the top left to the bottom right. And as we start to learn graphic design and we start to experiment in different ways of creating layouts, we sometimes think it's a bit boring and too simplistic, so we add things to the white space. In reality, what this is doing is it's actually showing the amateur side of your skills. A good principle is to not have too much stuff on the outside. So make sure you've got enough white space on the page. Don't clutter it unless it's an artistic thing that you need to do for the project, for the aesthetics.
Say aesthetics properly.
Aesthetics.
It's like you got in the last video, people go aesthetics in the comments.
It's aesthetics. Aesthetics. That's right. Aesthetics. I can't say it. So tip number 2 essentially is keep the white space. Allow it to be there. It trains the eye towards the content that you're bringing to the viewer. Mistake number 3 is poor readability or legibility. I've got dyslexia, which means that it's sometimes difficult for me to read lots of words on a paper. It sometimes also means that the words will kind of like jumble up as I'm reading. So me being a logo type designer might sound counterintuitive and a bit strange, but in reality, it's easier for me to see shapes within the letters. So when I talk about readability, I've got a really good sense of what it means for a typeface or a font or a piece of work to be readable. A lot of amateur designers don't know when something is readable, so they would automatically post to Reddit without knowing that the typeface or the font is too small or too large, or the actual typeface is just not accessible to other people. Maybe with those with bad eyesight, maybe with those with dyslexia. Choose a typeface that is easily readable. I choose Montserrat and FISB-CF. These are called sans serifs, or in the French, sans serif, which essentially means without sans. No. Which essentially means without serifs. That's the word sans. Sans serifs are really easy to read, and we've been trained to read them from a very young age. This is the reason why most corporate companies will use sans serif. Meta, which was Facebook, used sans serif, and they changed their typefaces all over the place when they were Facebook anyway, to make it even more readable and to modernize it. Your favorite store will probably have sans serif as their main logo type, unless it's very decorative, such as Theory 11, which is a logo that I really like, the actual logo type. It's a card company, a playing cards company. Or Bicycle, they're very old school. They've got like this heritage sort of feel. There you go, Bicycle. The typeface you use has to be legible, but not only that, you have to make it legible with sizing. In Illustrator, if you press Command or Control 1, you will actually view the page as 100%. That means that you're viewing it at the exact size of which it would be printed in real life. There are so many different rules of thumb or little hacks you can do with this, and I will save that for another video, but essentially make sure it's clearly readable and visible all the time, when it's zoomed in, when it's zoomed out at 100%. The next design mistake is again another principle of design, which is a lack of contrast. Contrast is like white and black. It's like blue and yellow, light and dark. It is what you see prominently in what you do not see. Contrast is one of the main fundamentals of design, and knowing what is good at contrast and what doesn't contrast well is important. And for me personally, I learned this just from experience and playing around with like colors as I was learning. There are many websites like Color Contrast Checker where you can check the contrast of a certain color that works well. Now, the problem is that we have is people are colorblind, and that's absolutely fine. We can't change that. So we need an ability to be able to change the contrast or the colors that we're seeing as designers to colors that people who may be colorblind see. The contrast will change. In a lot of ways that we see on the Reddit, we don't see enough contrast in either the logo design, so the actual color of the design. We don't see enough contrast through the negative space. We don't see enough contrast between the title text and the body text. Now, there's no real rule of thumb for contrast. It's kind of a hard one to get, and it can be subjective for the most part. But there are websites that will link in the description that will help you check the color contrast. Now, for typographic contrast, and by that I mean you have title text and you have maybe a subtitle and then body text. But a good rule that you can put into place for yourself when it comes to choosing contrast between type is when you're choosing the headline, the title text, skip a couple of weights and just basically divide the title text by 1.618 two times, and you will get the body text while skipping 2 weights. What this will do is it will give you great proportions, obviously, but it will also mean that you're getting good contrast between the boldness of the type. Before I go into the last one, I just want to tell you about Envato Elements really quick. You're a new designer, or maybe you're just up and coming, you're a student, or maybe a freelancer and you're just refreshing your skills, or you found this video. Assets are really difficult to find. And not only that, mock-ups, fonts, and all these things can be relatively expensive for the good quality ones. Well, Envato Elements has all the assets you need, from loads of fonts, mock-ups, scene generators, audio files, video templates for like After Effects and logo reveals. They've actually got 55 million, over 55 million assets for you to download with their subscription. And not only that, they offer an amazing simple license. We use assets from Envato Elements all the time with our client work. It's just super simple knowing that the license that we have with them, as soon as we stop maybe one day subscribing to Envato, we can still use the assets that we've downloaded from Envato indefinitely. If you click the link in the description, you get 50% off the annual subscription, which means that for less than $20 a month, you have access to over 55 million assets. It's a great deal no matter how you look at it. It's amazing. Thank you, Envato, for sponsoring this video. The last mistake I see a lot of designers make are following trends. There's nothing wrong with design trends. A lot of people think, you know, they're the design connoisseurs, and they get really mad when I make a video about trends, saying that, oh, you know, we're designers and we don't need to follow trends. You're wrong. It's important to know what the trends are. Trends are normally things that we see, patterns of design that we see in large companies or that a lot of designers are doing at once. For instance, design trends such as using crazy serifs, authentic serifs that we don't really see anymore, and people are using them in a modern sense. That started happening a couple of years ago. Or even like, you know, the nice gradient logos that we see that Meta are using. Now, a lot of people follow design trends, which is great and it can work, but the problem is design trends change. A trend isn't sustainable. It's not timeless. The principles of design are completely timeless. Every logo that we create in our agency comes out timeless. It will last over 10 years. Some of the best logos that we see today have been derived and inspired by timeless logos from in the early 1900s. Following trends isn't a bad thing. It's just something I wouldn't recommend. And when I see designers doing it, for instance, when I see everyone using gradients on their logos because they've seen Meta doing it, then it's kind of like, you know, you're just copying Meta. Everyone looks the same. There's no differentiation between the companies anymore. And also the functional aspect of gradients in logos can get a bit weird as well, especially if you're a printing company or a company that uses, you know, t-shirts or whatever. Meta is a digital company. I've got a video in the description below which outline all the design trends. I sort of predict them before they happen, but it's not really a prediction. It's just seeing what other people are doing and seeing what others are going to be doing in the next year. And that's great. It's a great way to learn how the design industry moves and what everyone's doing in the community. But don't follow a bandwagon. Stick with the principles. If you do that, your designs will last even longer, so you won't have to, like, you know, tell your client that your logo's only going to last like 2 years until this new technology comes out, sort of thing. But with that being said, don't discount them either. So don't blindly follow design trends. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you don't know who I am, I'm Will Paterson. I'm a graphic designer. I own an agency in the north of England, and we bring you videos every week, twice a week, with the express goal and mission to make your life easier as a designer by teaching you things you may not know and to also sharpen your skills. We want you to be a better designer after every single video that we bring out. So subscribe if you like the content, like and share this video with your mates, and I'll catch you in the next one. See you soon. Goodbye.
You know, PJ's just going to do a montage and you say
Aesthetics. The aesthetics. Aesthetics. Aesthetic. Aesthetics. Everyone else is saying it wrong. Hey, I went to speech therapy when I was younger.